Welcome to the NatRefs show, a podcast on the ever-changing world of natural refrigerants, brought to you by Shecco and sponsored by component maker Tecco. My name's Charlotte McLaughlin, and I'm the Brussels-based reporter in Europe. I'm joined today by my colleagues also in Europe, Marie Battesti,
Hello.
And from the US, our North American editor, Garry. We're going to take a look at the upcoming issues in 2019 and sort of the policy that we're looking forward to and expecting, and then also the market trends and where we're seeing the market evolving. So maybe to concretely focus on first, maybe we can look at the big policy trends. Marie, this year we've had the first implementation of the Kigali Amendment, which is a global agreement on global HFC phase down. So overview of that and what we're expecting from the market.
So indeed, the Kigali Amendment entered into force on 1st January this year, phasing down globally the production and use of HFCs. However, 2/3 of the parties to the Montreal Protocol are yet to ratify the text, including the United States and China. The problem is that they are the largest producers and consumers of HFCs. Therefore, although it entered into force, and I'm assuming the market will follow to align with the development of alternatives and everything, it would be even more meaningful, I guess, when those two countries will ratify the Kigali Amendment rather than the formal entry into force of this year.
So, Michael, have we heard anything from the US on ratifying Kigali? Do you think it'll actually happen? Or are we still in government shutdown mode?
Well, yeah, nothing's happening right at the moment with the government shutdown. I think that as long as Trump is president, he's not going to refer the Kigali Amendment for ratification.
But the industry in America is supporting this. And I mean, Trump always says he loves business. Business is telling him to do this. So what's the holdup?
Right. Yeah, that's true, but you still can't really predict what he's going to do. The problem with it is that it's an international treaty, and he doesn't care for international treaties. And it's also related to climate change, and doesn't believe in climate change. So those are two problems that may prevent him from referring it to the Senate for ratification. But I think once we get past the Trump era, whenever that may turn out to be,
I guess there's not much time left of Trump's presidency. We don't have long to go. Is it hopeful that somebody will replace Trump, or does it seem still quite likely that he's going to be in charge for another term?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, he's got two more years in his first term, his current term, and but he's facing a whole wide array of legal challenges and investigations that may shorten his term. But nobody really knows at this particular point. The U.S. will eventually get back on board with environmental treaties.
But there is a lot happening at the state level on HFC. So maybe if you can give an overview of what's coming up this year.
On the state level, of course, is where we're seeing the most activity. California, starting in January this year, is banning certain high GWP HFC refrigerants as part of their California Cooling Act. Adopted the EPA SNAP rules on HFCs that took effect in 2015 and 16 and were vacated last year by the U.S. Court of Appeals and the EPA. However, since California's adopted those rules for its state policy, they're banning R404A and R507A, among other refrigerants, starting January 1st this year for a whole variety of equipment, including new and retrofit supermarket systems and remote condensing units.
So basically, there's bans coming up this year, basically. Just in California? That's the only state that's doing it this year?
It's only right now in California, but 3 other states have announced they will be following suit with what California did, and they will regulating HFCs and taking on the vacated EPA regs as well. So those states, Connecticut, Maryland, and New York, and Washington State also announced.
So we'll probably see more developments coming up this year, basically, on the US on HFCs. But in Europe, we already are phasing down HFCs quite strongly. Marie, what is the kind of the big thing that's probably affecting the industry this year regarding the European F-gas regulation, which I guess applies to all the EU countries, but also countries that are not necessarily part of the European Union, but sort of follow the regulation as well?
Yeah, such as the newly United Kingdom, probably, who said that even if there's no deal Brexit, they will follow the F-gas regulation and align. But I guess you were referring as well to Norway or Switzerland, who as well, they don't belong to the EU as other countries like the member states, but they follow the rules and they align their legislation to the EU one. So under the EU F-gas regulation, there are the 2020 F-gas bans which are coming. So it's a new package of bans, and of course a year before the industry needs, if it's not already done, to adapt and anticipate those bans. As of 2020, the EU F-gas regulation bans the placing of the market across the block of movable room air conditioners and hermetically sealed commercial refrigeration equipment that uses refrigerants whose global warming potential is over 150. So it's very low. So natural refrigerants are quite well placed. And it also bans the use of HFCs whose global warming potential is over 2,500 in stationary refrigeration equipment, except that which cools to below minus 50 degrees Celsius, which is an exemption that is contested by some industry representatives who claim that, who actually work with natural refrigerants for this type of equipment, by the way. But yeah, so these are the main bans coming, and the industry needs now to be fully focused on those bans to adapt their business plan and product portfolio.
And from policymakers' perspective, is it very clear that people will follow these bans?
Well, so far the industry followed those bans, even though they complained. I don't expect that it should be any different. They knew as of 2014/15, when the F-gas regulation was put into force, that it was coming. So well. And then it's true, indeed it's the job of the countries to make sure it's implemented. So I know, like, for example, in France they have inspectors, they check randomly. There's this license for people using HFCs, so it allows them to control a little bit what's happening. So it should work. And natural refrigerants are a great alternative option, so hopefully we'll drive again the market towards those kind of solutions.
And from your perspective, are you seeing sort of development in the market aimed at complying with those bans, like for example in stationary refrigeration, so commercial refrigeration? Are we seeing a lot of development there in Europe?
Well, it seems based on the interviews and talks that we have with European manufacturers, the case for commercial refrigeration is kind of won now on the natural refrigerant side. It seems to be now considered as a mature, credible technology. When we were talking to manufacturers, when they were recalling trade shows over the past few years, apparently people came to them more a bit like out of curiosity, does it really work? Whereas now people come with real practical questions, like, I have a small store which has those challenges, is it possible? So in commercial refrigeration, it seems that the technology now is mature in Europe.
I think it's certainly the European case, but Michael, are we seeing the same development in the US? Is it a mature technology? Is it standard in new installations as it is here?
No, not yet.
And is there an expectation that in 2019 the situation will change, or will it continue?
So I think that we'll see, we've been seeing slow progress with natural refrigerants in the U.S. Over the last 3 or 4 years. transcritical CO2 supermarkets and now industrial places. Seeing a lot of installations of R290 cases, self-contained. Of course, ammonia in industrial low charge types of systems. So we're seeing the U.S. and also let's not forget Canada is doing a lot as well. So we're seeing progress. It's not up to the standard of Europe or Japan, but I think that it will continue to grow, and I think as more attention turns to climate change, it'll grow even more.
One key development, I think, that certainly from the European perspective, that where the US and North America is kind of slightly ahead in terms of European thinking, is the move towards low charge ammonia. That's something that I think, there's a lot more package units there, whereas in Europe we're kind of like still kind of just doing the same old thing when it comes to ammonia. There's some packaged ammonia systems and some low charge systems about, but it's not people are not pursuing it to the same great extent in the US. Why do you think that's the case?
Yeah, well, I mean, there are some players like Star Refrigeration, I believe, does packaged ammonia, low charge, and they have a division called Azane in the US. But yeah, I mean, it's there are some aggressive companies now in the U.S., notably NextCold, which is part of Hill Phoenix, and also Evapco, and Azane, and companies like Stellar and Simco. I mean, there is a push towards installing these low charge package units for a variety of reasons. Certainly, the lower charge is safer and gets the end user away from a number of regulations that apply to large charge over 10,000 pounds. So, yeah, that is a growth area here.
Yeah, certainly. And also maybe Marie, if you can give us, because we're not just talking about refrigeration here, we're also talking about the HVAC side of things. Mm-hmm. And I think there's been some key developments that are expected in 2019, especially coming from Asia.
Indeed, we are betting a lot on the potential of HVAC now with natural refrigerants, and China seems to be taking the lead with hydrocarbons. In early December, 8 major Chinese room air conditioning makers committed to selling 220,000 R290 units in 2019, for example. So those major manufacturers, those big names, not to mention them, would target the domestic Chinese market by next year, mid-2019, they said. So we expect kind of a driver for change.
Would these sales just be in China, or would they also be outside of China?
Well, basically, like they pledged to target the domestic Chinese market by mid-2019. But of course, the next step is exports, but it's not yet on the agenda. They are focusing on the domestic one at the moment.
And has there been any developments in the US regarding subsidies for natural refrigerants? There's the California cooling, but there's also San Francisco. I think they have their SMUD scheme. Are they also going to pursue that in 2019, Michael?
The legislature is working on procuring funding for the incentives for natural refrigerant equipment that have become available through the California Cooling Act. So the California state is working on getting the funding for that, hopefully soon. And in Sacramento, there's the utility, Sacramento Municipal Utility District, SMUD, that has a natural refrigerants incentive program. They've started. I believe they'll be starting this year supporting some local supermarkets installing natural refrigerant equipment. So that's really good news that program is getting underway. And but on the federal level, of course, we don't have any subsidies in the U.S. Quebec does in Canada.
Okay. Well, I Bet our readers are excited to see the updates as they progress throughout the year. Thank you very much, Marie Battesti and Michael Garry, for your time. I hope you join us in 2 weeks' time for another great NatRefs show.